What happens when we die? This is probably the single most anxiety-inducing question that any of us have had to confront. Most religions will tell us that if we're good, we get to spend eternity in paradise. Sounds great, but if you take an extra second to ponder the implications, it turns out to be terrifying. Out of all the possible things that could happen when you die, going to heaven is usually considered the best possibility by default. Eternal peace, eternal happiness, eternity in a perfect paradise where nothing ever goes wrong. At first glance, it sounds like the most desirable fate imaginable. But this initial appeal depends on a word we almost never think twice to think about: eternity. When we imagine heaven, we tend to focus on the place, what it looks like, how it feels, what kinds of pleasures it contains. But the real question isn't about where you spend the afterlife, it's about the fact that you never leave. No matter how beautiful a place is, no matter how perfectly it caters to you, heaven isn't defined by its scenery, it's defined by its duration. Eternity doesn't mean a very long time. It means time without limit. And once you take that seriously, the appeal starts to fall apart. Any experience, no matter how enjoyable, derives its value partly from contrast and scarcity. A perfect day feels perfect because the ones that came before it weren't. A favorite song feels special because it's better than the rest. Even the most intense pleasures fade when repeated enough times. Now imagine not just repetition, but repetition stretched across millions, billions, and trillions of years, with no possibility of interruption, escape, or conclusion. Eventually, novelty disappears. Not because the environment becomes worse, but because you have exhausted what it can offer. And when boredom has no endpoint, it stops being a mild discomfort and becomes something closer to torture. This is what makes eternity in a perfect place unsettling. Eventually, you get used to that perfection and it just becomes eternity in a place. Eternity takes whatever good heaven contains and strips it of the conditions that made it good in the first place. Perhaps we're thinking of heaven wrong. Maybe our entire conception of this place is based on our understanding of physical places and experiences in the material world, and heaven plays by different rules. Something to consider is that the way we often describe or visualize heaven doesn't make it look too appealing. This bleak representation might condition us to not be convinced by the idea that it even could be a perfect paradise. In Western media, heaven is often depicted as an empty place in the sky where the ground is made of clouds. There's babies with wings flying around, and maybe you have a guy over in the corner playing the harp or something. Right from the outset, this place looks lame and boring. And it's probably a bit cynical to describe heaven in such drab terms, but most religions don't provide a very detailed picture. They just give us assurances about how great it is with no further elaboration. So it kind of follows that most depictions have to really lean into personal interpretation and end up looking empty and uninteresting. But if we detach from this model, maybe we can conceive of an eternal afterlife that actually seems ideal, and that would make the forever problem moot. What if this heaven was personalized to us, and could fulfill any desire we possibly have at any given moment? Maybe this way we could solve the boredom problem. As soon as something becomes stale, you'd just experience something better. And perhaps as an added condition that sweetens the deal further, new positive experiences become available to you faster than you can exhaust them. So your possibilities always outpace what you've already done. This is a significantly better scenario than an infinite experience in a finite place, but it seems to me that it's still not airtight. What if novelty itself becomes monotonous? What if only ever feeling good emotions gets old? Maybe this sounds counterintuitive, but we could actually draw this conclusion by looking at the real world. There are those among us that have the resources to basically do whatever they want. And empirically speaking, that just doesn't provide permanent fulfillment. There are so many examples of people who functionally can do whatever they want, and it just never amounts to long-term happiness. Arguably, these people do face certain constraints that in our hypothetical sandbox of infinite possibilities don't exist. I'll admit that. But the core problem is that psychologically, happiness doesn't come from the ability to experience pleasure as soon as we desire it, but from the rare moments where pursuit pays off. And these moments are defined by their fleetingness. Taking those experiences and stretching them over an infinite time frame removes the one thing that makes them so treasured in the first place. Okay, what if we got to author the perfect afterlife? How would we make it truly worth inhabiting forever? There are a few options. What if we introduce some kind of amnesia? What if nothing ever gets stale because we're always experiencing it fresh? I, for one, have always dreamt of getting to experience great moments for the first time again. I can always play my favorite video games again and again, but I'd give the world to be able to experience them again for the first time. This is a pretty frivolous example, but imagine getting to experience those blissful moments from your childhood again, or the moment you met the love of your life again, or just a highlight reel of the absolute best moments in life over and over again, each time as though it's the first time. Isn't this pointless though? Genuinely, what would be the point of an afterlife if you're just in this stasis where you get a recursive positive stimulus, followed by a memory reset, and then rinse and repeat for eternity? Okay, maybe you could think of it as a reward for living the kind of life that earned you a place in heaven, or maybe it's for choosing the right religion, or maybe you passed some test and this is your prize. Even if this hypothetical afterlife sounds good enough to stomach eternity, the whole reality of the situation sounds depressing and empty. This is the problem with all the easy answers that try to make eternal life appealing. Amnesia, infinite loops, voluntary annihilation. Each fix makes eternity tolerable, but at the cost of draining its meaning. We can keep stacking conditions onto heaven until it sounds pleasant, but the more we patch it, the more it starts to feel like an empty thought exercise rather than something anyone would actually want. So why even think about this? We have no way of knowing if an afterlife exists, better yet what it would look like. And yet this question sits at the center of the human condition. Death is the one certainty, and what comes after is the greatest unknown. Because it's so mysterious, we default to the simplest axis possible: pleasure versus pain, heaven versus hell, reward versus punishment. But maybe that framing is the real mistake. Maybe pain isn't the thing we should be afraid of. After all, it seems like as we try to remove pain from the equation, we end up in a pit of nihilistic emptiness, which is debatably worse. The question now becomes, what gives life meaning? Or more importantly, what gives existence meaning? Now we're really getting into territory where no individual can answer authoritatively, but it's worth delving into anyway. This is also where the perspective of a theist and an atheist critically diverge. A theist would most likely assert that the ultimate source of meaning is God, and an atheist might tell you something along the lines of, it's for each person to figure out, or it's subjective. In any case, what we can be certain about is that it isn't just pleasure. If you look at what people actually care about in their lives, it's almost never static comfort. It's progress and transformation. It's the sense that something is being built, something is changing, or something is being overcome. A life where nothing changes might be comfortable, but it wouldn't feel meaningful. And what's most important to understand is that pain is often the catalyst for positive change. Shifting back to the topic of afterlife, since the hypothetical existence of an afterlife presupposes the existence of God, we can assume that the theist's answer to the question of meaning is correct in this case, and that God is the ultimate source of that meaning. We can then take what we understand about the role of progress and apply it here. If the purpose of existence is to draw closer to God, then that perpetual journey continues into the afterlife, whatever it may look like, and floods it with the fulfillment that all of these hypotheticals are devoid of. This seems to be the most robust explanation for an afterlife that is both worth being in and maintains meaningfulness. But it still leaves one question open-ended, and it's the one we started with. What about eternity? There's multiple ways of reconciling this. One is by thinking of this afterlife as asymptotic. You're always getting closer to God, therefore you'll always have meaning. But since God is eternally unknowable, you'll never actually directly meet God. The other is that maybe you do eventually meet God, but because that is the object of existence in the first place, it is the ultimate final state that transcends any notion of boredom, monotony, or lack of fulfillment. A critic might think this latter point of view is semantically escaping the problem of eternity by simply asserting that it's not relevant, rather than meaningfully addressing it. I suppose that's a fair response, but it touches on something that really undermines this whole conversation. We're attempting to contemplate the afterlife from a frame of reference that is fully insufficient to qualify or quantify anything beyond its bounds. By definition, the afterlife does exactly that. It is a plane of existence higher than this one and fundamentally cannot be understood. So we seem to have reached the epistemic barrier. Eternity seems terrifying, and if we extrapolate from that, we could arrive at the conclusion that heaven fails to live up to its promise of eternal paradise. But the issue with this entire line of thinking is that we're projecting our physical intuitions of life onto something that erases the physical frame entirely. Our mortal existence is meaningful because there are stakes and because it ends. If we have an eternal life, it is meaningful in a way that is not familiar to us, and it is for that reason that we feel the existential anxiety. I wanted to conclude this video by talking a little bit about what the purpose of this YouTube channel is and what to expect moving forward. The motivation behind this project was the fact that, from my point of view, the quality of discourse in the intellectual space is degrading at a really alarming rate. And I think some of the virtues that undergird healthy conversation are humility and honesty and keeping an open mind about things. And in that spirit, I wanted to make videos just about my own perspective on things relating to philosophy, culture, religion, whatever it may be, and to really encourage people to interact with those ideas. And obviously, I don't have any viewers yet. I just started, and the approach that I'm taking is one of iterative progress. I'm really hoping to just learn how to make videos by trying to make videos, and in the meantime, sort of garner an audience. So if you come across this video and it made you think about something, please leave a comment. And I think what I would really like to see in the long-term future of this channel is for really substantive conversations to come out of these videos. It's not me just putting my ideas out into the void, but I think, the nature of discourse is that it has to be very conversational, and that's what I am really hoping to create. So if you like this idea, please subscribe, stick around, because there's a lot more to come. And if this video made you think anything at all, please leave a comment. I would love to hear whatever anybody has to say about this, whether you agree, disagree, like what I have to say, think I'm a complete idiot. Please just tell me in the comments, and hopefully we can create some quality dialogue. And of course, thank you for watching.